Okay, just try to wrap your head around this for a second. A single bottle of, well, liquid, that costs more than a brand new Ferrari, maybe even more than your house. It sounds completely insane, right? But it's real. And today, we're going to figure out exactly how something like that is even possible.
And no, I'm not making this number up. $558,000. That was the actual record-smashing price someone paid for one single bottle of wine. This all went down in October of 2018 at a Sotheby's auction right in New York City, and yeah, it didn't just break the old records, it totally shattered them.
So this is the big question, right? How on earth does that happen? I mean, can a wine really taste that good? Or is it about the history? Or is it something else? Well, we are about to dive deep and unpack the absolute perfect storm of things that had to come together to create this kind of mind-blowing price tag.
All right, so let's set the scene. Picture that auction room. People who were there said the energy was just frenetic. And get this, the experts, the pros at Sotheby's, they figured it would sell for maybe around 32 grand. The final price didn't just beat that. It came in at nearly 17 times the estimate. Just incredible.
And if you're thinking, okay, maybe that was just a fluke, one person got carried away, well, think again. Literally minutes later, a second bottle from the exact same vintage sold for just under $500,000. So no, this wasn't just some rich person's whim. This was serious, high-stakes, intense demand.
So what is this wine? What's this so-called unicorn wine that can command that kind of cash? It's time to meet the legend at the center of this whole story.
The wine in question is a 1945 Romanée-Conti. It comes from a producer called Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, or DRC as it's known in the wine world. And you have to understand, DRC isn't just a great winery, it's pretty much considered the most prestigious, most legendary wine producer on the entire planet, right from the Burgundy region of France.
You know, to really get a sense of this wine's almost mythical status, listen to this quote from the author Roald Dahl. He said, well, you can read it for yourself. It's a bit much, but it really gives you an idea of the kind of, let's just say, supernatural reputation Romanée-Conti has with the very, very few people who have ever been lucky enough to taste it.
Okay, so that brings us to the first major piece of this puzzle, the first key ingredient in our $500,000 recipe: rarity. And I'm not just talking about regular rare, I mean extreme, almost unbelievable rarity. It's simple economics, right? You can't put a price on something you can't find. And this wine, it's the very definition of elusive.
600. That's the number you need to remember. Just 600 bottles, that's it. That is the total number of bottles of 1945 Romanée-Conti that were ever made. Why so few? Well, the weather that year was just awful. Hail, frost, you name it. It completely decimated the harvest, leaving them with this incredibly tiny amount of wine.
Now, to really put that number into perspective, in a normal year, a good year, the Domaine might produce around 5,600 bottles, which, by the way, is already super rare. So the 1945 vintage isn't just a little rare, it's almost 10 times rarer than a wine that's already considered one of the rarest on Earth. That's just a whole other level.
But the story of its rarity gets even crazier. We need to talk about something called pre-phylloxera. So back in the late 1800s, this tiny, evil little pest called phylloxera basically came through and wiped out almost all of the vineyards in Europe. It was a catastrophe. To save their vineyards, winemakers had to graft their European vines onto disease-resistant American roots. But Romanée-Conti, they held out. For decades, they managed to keep their original, ancient, ungrafted vines alive.
And this is the absolute kicker. 1945 was the last dance. It was the final harvest from those ancient, original vines. Right after they made this wine, they had to give up the fight. They ripped up the entire vineyard and replanted it. They didn't even produce any wine again until 1952. So what does that mean? It means the 1945 isn't just rare. It is literally a taste of a lost world. It is the absolute end of an era. And just to add one more layer of rarity on top of all that, the vineyard itself is tiny. I mean, ridiculously small. We're talking about just 1.8 hectares. That's about 4.5 acres. To put that in perspective, that's smaller than a lot of city parks. This isn't some giant, sprawling estate. It's a tiny, almost sacred patch of dirt that produces a minuscule amount of wine even in a great year.
Okay, so we've established it's insanely rare. But that's only half the story. Now we get to the second key factor, which is all about history. It's not just about what this wine is, it's about when it was made.
Think about the year 1945. The grapes for this wine were picked in the fall of that year, just weeks after the end of World War II. I mean, just let that sink in. This bottle isn't just fermented grape juice. It's a symbol of survival, of resilience. It's literally a taste of the world's first sigh of relief and celebration after years of unimaginable horror and conflict.
On top of all that, this specific bottle had a perfect backstory. In the wine world, they call this provenance, and it's a huge deal. This bottle came directly from the personal cellar of a guy named Robert Drohin, who is an absolute legend in Burgundy. Why does that matter? Because it means its authenticity was 100% guaranteed. And in a market where fake high-end wines are a massive problem, that kind of guarantee is priceless.
So what happens when you take that extreme rarity and you mix it with that profound history? Well, you get our final ingredient, its status as an undisputed, top-of-the-line collectible asset. This is where we talk about the price of perfection. You know, top wine critics like Clive Coates don't just say this is a great wine. They call it the benchmark. It's the yardstick. It's the standard that every other great Pinot Noir in the world hopes to be measured against. To put it simply, by pretty much every account, it's considered absolute perfection in a bottle. And of course, the market totally backs that up. Just look at this list of the most expensive bottles ever sold. Who's at the top? Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. Not just once, but twice. DRC just completely dominates the high-end auction world. It's not about this one bottle. This producer consistently commands the biggest prices, making it a true blue-chip investment for collectors.
So let's just recap the magic formula here. This crazy price didn't happen because of just one thing. It was a true perfect storm. You had the extreme rarity, only 600 bottles. You had the incredible historical significance, the end of a war and the end of a vineyard. You had unmatched legendary quality. And finally, you had that perfect, guaranteed authenticity. You put all that together, and you get the ultimate collectible.
Which really brings us all the way back to where we started. When somebody writes a check for $500,000 for one bottle, what are they really buying? Is it just some old fermented grape juice?
Of course not. You're not buying a drink. You're buying a story. You're buying a liquid artifact. It's a real, tangible connection to a very specific moment in human history, a moment that saw the end of a world war and the end of an ancient vineyard. It's a masterpiece that literally can never, ever be made again.
And that really leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. When does something that's made to be consumed, a bottle of wine, stop being just a drink and become a timeless artifact? Well, I think this bottle gives us the answer. It happens right at that magical intersection of incredible rarity, legendary quality, and a story that you just can't forget.